So, to follow up last week's episode, dinner with the ancestors. Ancestors, family ties, family drama. It can be a very loaded topic, right? But when I say to invite the ancestors to dinner, I'm not talking about your typical Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner where the invitation comes with that obligation to show up and put on your best mask and bite your tongue, blood running down, just to get through one meal, one day without being triggered by somebody's joking snide remark or jab or backhanded compliment. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about here. And then there's always that one member of the family everyone hopes won't show up and cause trouble. Many never get through one family dinner unscathed. So if that's what you're thinking about, put it out of your mind. That's not what I'm talking about. A gathering of the ancestors to celebrate Samhain or any other time is nothing like that. So release that finger from your trigger and take a deep breath, relax a minute. So who are these ancestors that you're inviting to dinner anyway? Well, you can throw the doors open wide and take what you get, but that's way more adventurous than I like to be. I like a little more controlled approach, which will be far more enjoyable and beneficial long term anyway. So our ancestors, who are they? Well, they come in many forms. We have genealogical ancestors, meaning parents, grandparents, direct line of descendant. We have DNA ancestry, which means not necessarily your direct ascending line or genealogical ancestors, but perhaps somewhere in your DNA you have Irish or Swedish or Ethiopian. And that DNA connection, your ancestors, you probably don't know their names, but you know them by culture. You also have Akashic ancestry. So if you're listening to this, then you most likely are an old soul. So over the many lifetimes that you've lived, to obtain the diversity of experiences that you needed to benefit from, sometimes the soul has chosen to be male, sometimes female. We've been Caucasian, Black, Chinese, Jewish, etc. We don't necessarily stay in one culture or one ancestral line from lifetime to lifetime. So when someone tells you you can't use sage, for instance, because you're not a Native American or have Native American ancestry, well, perhaps you do in an Akashic remembrance that's been carried forward in your soul, and it creates a deep connection to that Native American heritage, even if it's not in your present and current lifetime's DNA report. One more, you also have galactic ancestry. Now, I know this can be controversial depending on your beliefs about life in the universe and whether there are others out there. But for me, there is no question. I have galactic ancestors, and I believe most of you do as well. Okay, on to dinner. Now, your approach to dinner with the ancestors will be different than mine, based on a lot of factors, which include one that I think is really important to decide, and that's whether others in your family will be participating in your Samhain ancestor ritual, and which ancestors you want to focus on, or all at once, which I personally find too overwhelming in one sitting. But we have to start somewhere, so let's talk genealogy. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And I always include the recently deceased loved ones, friends, extended family. Definitely anyone who has made their transition during this since my last ancestral dinner, but all who are still strong in my mind or wish to make their presence known, I consider during my dinner plans. If the whole family's participating, then I like to prepare a family dinner with everybody's favorite foods and that extra plate for the ancestors who we're welcoming and honoring. Now for me, this means that dinner's likely to have no real theme, And many times the foods don't even go together. They look more like this random potluck of conflicting foods. And some of them, quite honestly, are not even going to get eaten because no one currently even likes those foods. But that's what makes it so much fun and, well, so deeply meaningful as well. So, if extended families participating, hey, maybe Aunt Susie wants to bring her mother's or grandmother's favorite, or another family member can bring something meaningful to one of their ancestors. So, my family dinner, just to give you an example, might include things like oyster stew or pickled pig's feet to honor my grandfather, who loved those things for some odd reason, but they really stand out in my mind. Maybe salmon cakes or cabbage rolls, which bring fond memories of my granny. Definitely mashed potatoes, because in my family, mashed potatoes were served with every meal, even spaghetti. Yeah, go figure. Maybe there'll be sliced avocado with soy sauce, because that's the weird way my uncle ate them. Thick sliced fresh tomatoes with a little salt, even though they're out of season. I can still picture the look on my great grandmother's face every time she bit into a fresh garden tomato. There'll be green beans cooked to death, because that's the way they made them. Homemade bread with strawberry jam, homemade, of course, and with a little sugar stirred in, because my great granny always added more sugar even to the sweetest jam. Then for dessert, perhaps peach cobbler or butter pie, or even rhubarb or gooseberry pie, all with vanilla ice cream, and if I really want to go retro, Cool Whip. All right, now at some point during the night, I might even go to the cabinet and take a swig of Jim Beam whiskey, straight from the bottle, because that's what I remember. Because my great-grandfather always, although he was never a drinker, he always kept a bottle on the pantry shelf for making medicinal camphor. And then, my middle-aged granny at the time always loved the taste. So she would sneak in there once in a while and take a small sip, just for the flavor, and then spend the next hour carefully avoiding contact with her father, who was then in his 70s, and she was probably in her 50s, just to keep him from smelling it on her breath. Well, the list goes on, but you get the idea. Those little things that remind us of those people and bring them clearly back to our memories. And, if you're looking back at my food list, none of those really go together. But each one brings back that wonderful memory and can then be shared and talked about, and others at the table can bring their memories into the mix. When the night has ended, it's as if each and every one of those ancestors were not only being remembered and honored, but they were really participating in the evening, because they were. Whether they've moved on to their next physical experience or not, I believe a part of them comes forth whenever we think about them. So, oh yeah, and no need to leave out those fur babies who've crossed over either. They're part of our family. And they often return to us in another pet down the line, right? Especially when those doors of loving energy and memory remain open between you and them. So bring them on in. So toward the end of the night, when I've had a few moments alone, and perhaps it's in a separate ritual or at my altar, or just when I'm clearing the table, doing the dishes, or later when I'm just about to drop off to bed, I take a few moments to thank each ancestor for coming to dinner and for all they brought to my life, because they did. This is also a time when I usually go deeper and ask about any messages they have for me at this time. And the answers always surprise me, and they're always there. Now, I know all these memories they're not always good ones, right? Though, many times those ancestors brought both blessings and challenges. but even the challenges. They made us who we are today, and we wouldn't be who we are without them. This visit from the ancestors, it's also a good time to acknowledge that each soul has its own path. No one's perfect, not you, not them. And each person was just doing the best they could at any given point along that path. In most cases, any harm they caused was likely not intentional. It was just part of their own learning and growing process. Sometimes, often, less than ideal behaviors of our parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, may have been a result of generational trauma. They may have been the first. They may not have been the first. They may have been carrying it forward as well. Things that they were exposed to and then passed along because they didn't know how to clear or manage it better themselves. Not intentionally, just due to lack of skill to resolve the trauma that they were subjected to. By welcoming your ancestors, sharing memories over dinner, you're building powerful bonds with your ancestors based on understanding, love, and compassion. And creating that compassionate bond, despite or because of the challenges in those relationships, can open the door to healing, both your personal hurt as well as theirs, by traveling back in time and helping to heal those original traumas passed down to them, then to you, and perhaps even inadvertently being passed on to your children and grandchildren and those yet to come. Not one of us is free from generational consequences. Are you acting and behaving in ways that aren't yours, but maybe your ancestors? Ever feel like you're looking out of the eyes of your dad or another ancestor when you think about something or react to something in a certain way? Is there anything in your parents' behavior or path that you see repeating that you want to change, break that cycle? Did you see positive or negative patterns of aging or death demonstrated by both parents and even grandparents? Ready to appreciate or change that aspect of your life as you age? Well, was it implanted into your belief system, for instance, by your ancestors? Like, was suffering required to be a good person? Or maybe hard, backbreaking work was a sign of good character? Or money issues? Ooh, that's a huge one. Did you see the same beliefs in your parents and grandparents? Perhaps in the hereditary group of your ancestors. Like, did you know that Jewish ancestry carry a special anxiety gene? Not surprising, right? What's in your past that's not surprising, that's being carried forward? Well, next week, we're going to talk about how to stop generational trauma, stop it with you, and even how to reverse those effects moving back through time. Healing generational trauma is not to be taken lightly, and it's too important to rush through, so we're going to take a full episode on this. It's going beyond your parental line, because generational trauma not only exists in genealogical families, but among entire cultures. And your connections to these cultures, based on your DNA, Akashic, or even galactical ancestry, can start and continue the much needed healing on the planet. Now, looking back, just consider racial trauma alone that's been perpetuated throughout the cultures, including African Americans, Native Americans, the Jewish peoples, and many others on the planet. This is not limited to just one. Much healing needs to happen. And you can take an active role in that in a much more powerful way than staging protests. Just another benefit and perhaps responsibility of being a witch. To better pave the way for your role in this planetary healing, make those connections not only with the familial ancestors, but also in a similar way with your current cultural and lifetimes of Akashic ancestry. They're all important. They're all part of you. Who they are is something only you can answer. You don't have to do any deep research or DNA test to figure it out, though. You likely intuitively know. You know based on the cultures you may have been drawn to in the past. But if you need a bit more guidance, hey, you're a witch. So whatever form you use, divination is a great way to do this. Use what you're accustomed to. Now, for something like this, I would go to my trusty pendulum. But I could also use any number of other tools that I have in my quiver, so to speak, including my crystal ball, other scrying tools, a black mirror, for instance, water bowl. Journeying is an awesome way. You can take a journey right through your belly button and head right into that ancestral line. Even meditation, and that's just to name a few. I have included a couple of tools for you. Look down in the messages or go to the website, grab them for free. Okay, so now once you've determined or remembered your cultural or Akashic ancestry, make the connection and ask what traumas in these groups need to be healed so that the culture and humanity can move forward. Now, some are obvious. You get those from the news and the world around us, but there may be deeper, more unrecognized traumas that need to be healed first so that those obvious ones can be cleared more easily. That's the special gift you have. Society may not even know they're there. Dig deep. The collective consciousness is working on some of those trauma clearings, but those little things that allow for them, that's where we can step in and play a huge role. What were the thoughts and circumstances of your ancestors and their experiences? Not only the traumatic experience, not only that trauma, but the good things. The good things that allowed not only for your existence, but to bring you to this point in life where you can bring back that ancestral wisdom. You are awakening. You have gifts and skills that you are awakening and did have awakened to many times because of those seeds planted by your ancestors. Maybe the energy wasn't right for them at the time, but it was planted for you. Appreciate that. Once you've brought all that information and awareness in, then take action. Take action as the powerful witch that you are. Look up The Witches of World War II. Interesting read, very powerful. It's inspiring if you don't know the story. So this process will be the main topic of next week. So if you're an activism witch, or this just interests you from a personal cultural standpoint, then join us next week to learn the how-to of it all. Until then, live using and believing in the power of magic.